This is Stories from the States. I'm Chris Fitzsimon. This week, we're continuing to talk about two proposed ICE detention centers in rural Pennsylvania. In recent months, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security spent more than $1 billion buying nearly a dozen warehouses in several states to turn them into immigrant detention centers. One of the proposed centers is in Tremont Township in Schuylkill County. In part two of their series, Iced Out, the Pennsylvania Capital star's Emily Previte spent some time in Tremont Township and its rural surroundings. Those who've been most vocal about the potential ICE facility agree the area simply can't support the operation DHS has in mind. Some see the planned detention center as an opportunity. Others fear it will only exacerbate the community's economic and environmental problems. Just a quick note, if you didn't listen to the first episode about ICE's plans and the community response, I'd recommend you start there before you start this one. You can check out the episode description for all the episodes. Meanwhile, here's part two of the three-part series, Iced Out.
Joyce Wetzel, who owns the daycare right next to the warehouse poised to become an ICE facility, might feel overlooked by some of her elected representatives, but her situation certainly registered with some of her neighbors. One is Bernie Gardella.
Well, that's the other problem. You got a daycare right there. Like, how smart is that?
I talked to Bernie in his office at Roush Creek Off-Road Park. It takes up 3,000 acres, about a mile from the warehouse.
We are a four-wheeling community destination place. We provide a place for people to come wheeling with their 4x4 rigs, Jeeps and trucks. We host a lot of events and stuff like that here too.
He says there are a handful of similar venues throughout the coal region.
And this part of the country is all coal mining areas, and basically we turned it into something useful and resourceful, instead of it just sitting here abandoned and not being used for anything.
Bernie's originally from Massachusetts.
I moved to Pennsylvania in '96. I've been here ever since then. The past 10 years or so, I've been in this area.
So where in Massachusetts?
Just outside of Worcester, a small town called Boylston.
Oh, I guess I can still kind of hear the accent.
Yeah, you get me talking and it usually comes out.
Bernie's been running this park for more than a decade, and in Pennsylvania for more than half his life at this point. He's 56.
It's quiet. It's great. It's peaceful. It's, other than the road traffic, I love it. We have 3 acres and most of it's woods. Neighbors, we say hi to neighbors, people look out for each other, stuff like that still. A lot simpler times up here.
Okay, well, maybe not right now. Can you describe why we're here today, like what brought us here together?
Oh, what brought us here together? This is that'll be a good one because it's our government trying to come in and put warehouses into play that are going to be detention centers. Supposedly, who knows what else they have up their sleeve with that? I definitely don't like much of the government. They don't care about anybody but themselves. So, not the local, the federal, all of that. Yeah, it's.
I met Bernie and his father, also Bernie, at a Tremont Township supervisors meeting. Admittedly, I wouldn't have been there if not for the detention center issue. They would have, regardless. They've rarely missed a monthly session since Bernie Sr. moved up here from Florida 8 years ago after his wife died.
I've worked with the township for a few years too, helping them out here or there when they need help, mostly plowing and stuff like that. We're 1,500 feet up where we're sitting right now. It won't snow down in town. It'll snow up here. So you could be coming up the mountain and halfway up, you run into snow. So they got to be out taking care of all that stuff.
Driving in this area can be really peaceful. The roads also can be windy and subject to icing over with that unexpected snowfall Bernie mentioned, potentially compounded by blinding fog that can develop in the matter of an hour or so, all of which I experienced the night I met him, immediately afterward, on my way home from the township supervisors meeting.
The fog, I get to the point where I can't see out my office window into the parking lot. So yeah, the roads need to be maintained. Things need to be taken care of. You start cutting all that money, you start taking $200,000 out of a budget, what's going to happen?
Bernie's referring to the township standing to lose $196,000 in tax revenue. That's about 40% of its annual budget. Now that the former Big Lots site has been purchased by the federal government, which is tax exempt.
That's going to be levied back onto the people, which we already just got reassessments done in 2026. That's putting a hurting on things as it is. So now they're taking all this money away, and it's just going to hurt everybody even more. This is a surviving area. It's not a thriving. You know what I mean? You have people that are on retirement. They're on fixed incomes. Take away any of the politics with what they're actually doing over there, they're going to decimate this area. It's going to be even poorer than it was.
The thing is, the township, county, and school district already gave up taxes on this property for years as a way to entice Big Lots to do business here through the state's Keystone Opportunity Zone designation. That tax break ended in 2011.
Now they're paying their taxes, and the township was finally able to buy some newer equipment and stuff like that to maintain the roads. Prior to that, they're using junk because they didn't have the money.
Bernie says public officials should have moved faster in the beginning, just before Christmas, when the Washington Post published a list of potential detention center sites that included Tremont. At minimum, several local officials knew about the Post article within a few days, according to documents obtained by the Capital Star. The head of the Schuylkill County Economic Development Corporation emailed a group of them about it, saying he'd been unable to verify ICE's interest in the former Big Lots distribution center. Blue Owl, the former owner who sold the property to the feds, had hired Binswanger, a real estate brokerage in Philadelphia, to market the site. The people at Binswanger who directly handled the property did not respond to requests for comment.
Everybody you asked, nobody had an idea. Who knows who knew about it? Everybody lies. There was an email sent at some point prior questioning about the taxes on the building. That right there should have been your telltale sign that they were looking at buying that.
The inquiry Bernie's referencing was a signal that local officials recognized. Tremont Township's tax collector got a letter dated the first week of January checking for liens on the property on behalf of the federal government. The following week, the Pottsville Republican Herald had a story in the paper about the plans for a detention center in Tremont.
Everybody said they didn't know anything about it. You're going to have to wait until they file for a deed. Well, if we wait till they file for a deed, it's too late.
The deed was signed January 15th, though it wasn't recorded until February 2nd. In the interim, there was a town hall meeting organized by Rachel Wallace. She's the Democrat challenging Congressman Dan Muser, a Republican who's been in office for nearly a decade. I talked to her about 6 weeks after the fact, this spring, at Roma Pizza in Pottsville, the county seat, during lunch rush on a Friday.
So the Washington Post had this story back in December, but I initially missed it and then started getting phone calls from people in the... at first I just thought, okay, it's a rumor, but the more that I looked into it, the more it seemed real. And so, honestly, my first reaction was, what does the community think? And so I started reaching out to people in Tremont and saying, they had all, I didn't have to break the news to anybody, they all knew. They knew that it was rumored, and people were talking about, I heard things like, we're not a dumping ground for this kind of stuff. There's a daycare center there. There were water issues. Those were the first, kind of three big things that I heard from people as I was reaching out to them. And then I just thought we should do a town hall. We should bring people together and see where the community's at and see what people's concerns are. And to me, that felt especially important because it was not a done deal yet. And so, we have this big town hall. Over 100 people come out to this little fire company in, right outside of Tremont. And the place is packed. It's 7 degrees outside, and it was very clear that, we had people from across the political spectrum. There were Democrats, Republicans, and you could tell based on people's comments kind of where they fell politically, but it was very clear that locally this was a bad thing for the community and people didn't want it, and they wanted to know, how do we stop it?
This event was January 29th, same as the effective date of sale in county records, though it seemed like few people realized that at the time.
The state representatives were there, of course, saying they don't know anything about it. Because, yeah, they probably didn't know anything about it, but it's on a list, so why aren't you looking into what can be done?
I called Joanne Stair, the state representative whose district includes Tremont Township. She is a Republican and ran for office after working as a nurse for more than 3 decades, including in home care and hospice. She's also the first woman to represent the 107th district.
Hello.
And the first woman from Schuylkill County elected to the state house.
The discussion was it was a Democrat rally, basically. Rachel Wallace had invited all of us to it, and basically said, just because the government buys a building doesn't mean it's a detention center. They certainly didn't come here and ask my permission to put an ICE center in my backyard. And so at that meeting, I said, in defense of ICE and all the conflicting reports about it, it's a necessary evil.
Stair told me it seems to her that ICE targets people with criminal records or outstanding charges, and that other undocumented immigrants who happen to be around also are taken into custody, a method known as collateral arrests. This practice is long held, controversial, and accounted for almost a third of immigration arrests in Pennsylvania. It's one of the highest rates of any state, according to an analysis by our sister outlet, Stateline, of data from August 2025 through this past March. Also, the percentage of immigrants in custody without criminal records has ballooned, and the number of detained immigrants in the U.S. about doubled during 2025. That's down slightly so far this year, which experts attribute to backlash over the federal government's mass deportation push generally, and its tactics, in particular, DHS escalation in Minneapolis, including agents killing Renee Good and Alex Peretti. Even still, the number of people detained without criminal histories outnumbers those with convictions and charges. That was not the case a couple years ago. It's hard to fathom that could only be explained by being unlucky enough to be around during targeted arrests.
They have a job to do. And I got really railroaded because I said, if somebody would harm my family member, I would want them to go to jail or get out of the country or have some kind of problem. I did request that, we don't want any kind of disturbances that was going on out in Minnesota. That was disastrous out there. People are certainly free to protest. That's their First Amendment right. But they're not free to riot and disrupt our communities.
Stair acknowledges that the federal government owning the property will mean $1 million in tax losses every year unless the feds agree to compensate the taxing districts to make up for it. She also has concerns about how people will be treated while detained.
We have a huge human trafficking problem in the United States, and people coming through our facility out here may absolutely be victims. Drug mules, people in the sex trade, brought here maybe against their will.
Stair thinks the majority of her constituents support the detention center.
We've been a neglected community for 30 plus years. We have a biosolid factory on one side. We have a chicken manure factory on another side. We have a chemical waste dump paper sludge factory on the other side. It couldn't get much worse. Would I rather it be a nice hospital going up in the area or something less controversial? Of course. But as it is, it's a nice facility. The federal government came in. They're bringing with it federal jobs. On a conference call we had with Department of Homeland Security, they told us that they're looking at between 2,000 and 2,500 jobs. They're willing to spend millions on infrastructure because we have no storage or water in that particular area. We have emergency water plans in effect, which is a tank on the top of the hill that they fill with water twice a day, and they're telling us they're more than willing to spend the money on to make it sure it's upgraded for our community. Our whole community will benefit.
Hundreds of people lost their jobs when Big Lots closed the warehouse a year and a half ago, but it did continue to generate tax revenue until ICE bought it. At that point, Rachel Wallace wasn't living in Schuylkill County again just yet. She was still in Washington, where she spent more than a decade working in government, between posts with the Senate, the State Department, and Office of Management and Budget. She moved back to the coal region last year after her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She grew up here, and her family's been in the area for generations.
And there's a much longer history, of course, being in the anthracite coal region, and what that means here for us economically. And so we are hungry for economic development in Schuylkill County and the surrounding areas. We want to bring in good businesses, we want to bring in good jobs. And this is the opposite of economic development, and so I think at the very least, that's not what we want for our county. And that's not even getting into, there's no water, there's no sewage capacity, there's no local police force. A lot of people in Schuylkill County, including Tremont, you're gonna call the state police, you're gonna wait 20 minutes for them to show up. And that's what you've got. And I don't think, I expect that something like a mega facility like this would mean protesters coming from out of the community. They don't care, they don't live there. Who is going to help people feel safe? And so I understand why the community. This is not about national politics. This is about a local issue.
Yes and no. Probably it's both. Wallace also says she would support rules along the lines of a recent proposal from New Hampshire's congressional delegation. It would require DHS to solicit public comment and get written approval from state and local officials before initiating development of an ICE processing or detention facility. It would also mandate notification of relevant congressional committees. Pennsylvania Representative Chrissy Houlihan has signed on as a co-sponsor. Houlihan is a Democrat and an Air Force veteran, and she sits on the House Armed Services Committee and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. She was first elected to Congress in 2018, same as Muser. Her district actually borders his. It includes some of the Philadelphia suburbs and a piece of Berks County, but not Upper Bern, where the second detention center will be. That is squarely in Muser's district, the 9th. Back to Bernie Gardella.
Now all of a sudden, the governor's saying, we're not going to give them the permits they need. Why not put that out there prior to them buying it? I mean, there's a hint that they were coming, and it was a hint that it was them. We were on a list. Everybody knew it. So why aren't they telling the federal government, hey, if you guys plan on buying this property, here's what's going to happen? Because that probably could have squashed it.
Governor Shapiro did write to Nome, CCing relevant federal, state, and local officials, and his letter details the issues with infrastructure and water supply in Tremont and Upper Bern. But that was 2 weeks after the properties were sold. The State Department of Environmental Protection has since issued orders that essentially block ICE from tapping into water and sewage systems at the properties, in lieu of detailed plans for expanding them and other local infrastructure to accommodate the thousands of additional people that the detention centers will bring. The orders also detail the limitations of current capacity. As we mentioned, the ICE facility would add more than twice as many people currently served by these systems. Put another way, this would mean more people coming to the area and straining resources like roads, hospitals, and first responders than live in any municipality in Schuylkill County, with the exception of the largest one, Pottsville. ICE has not responded to my questions about plans, budget, and timeline for developing infrastructure here. It's appealing the state's orders in the meantime.
The state holds them from getting it, okay? Now what happens to that building? Now, if the feds don't sell it, then it sits empty. Now everybody loses even more because now we don't have taxes.
County commissioners say they'll pursue a payment in lieu of taxes with the federal government. The agreements aren't uncommon or even a long shot in this situation. But one issue with a pilot, or PILT as they're known, is with the feds, they're subject to some uncertainty with budget negotiations every year and possible delays when lawmakers can't come to an agreement on time. The National Association of Counties has lobbied for years to try to change that without success.
I don't trust anything they'll do. Plus, I know they were talking about getting it done by, they wanted them open by the end of 26. I mean, how? There's nothing over there right now. They haven't started it. There's been no movement. They're going to get halfway through their infrastructure change. Everything in Congress is going to change to get your Republicans, the ones in power now. Once that shifts back over to the Democrats, they're going to pull the plug on all of it, and everything's just going to sit wherever it is. It's the changing of the guards, and everything's going to get rubber stamped back the other way. Eventually, we're going to lose no matter what.
You're listening to Iced Out. On the next episode, you'll get a fuller picture of the risks a 7,500-person detention center poses to the host community, which already is contending with problems caused by active industries and damage left by those long defunct, like coal mining.
And there's a lot of people that are worried because of not knowing, and it's one of those things that you got to kind of let the cards fall where they do, because, I mean, if they're going to need to upgrade the water and the sewer, obviously it's going to get done.
If you like what you hear, please share it with a friend. You can find the full series wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to the Capital Stars newsletter for a heads up about new installments of this series and other stories about how people are affected by decisions in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. It's PennsylvaniaCapital-Star.com, and we've included a link in the show notes. Tim Lambert is the Capital Stars editor-in-chief and series executive producer. Special thanks to WITF for the use of their studios, and to States Newsroom national editor Sarah Baranowski and national podcast producer Mallory Chang. I'm Emily Previty. Thanks for listening.